In a world where opinions are a dime a dozen and they can come flying at you at any moment and may bristle you the wrong way, how can you, like Taylor Swift, learn how to shake it off? Well, that's what we're going to explore this month on the Painted Porch in our Painted Porch book club. Hello, we are Painted Porch Strategies. I'm Amy Yakowski, and I'm here with Sierra Ram Cantrell and Rob Hunter. And we're a training and advisory company that is dedicated to the idea that you can be the architect of your life and the master of your mindset when you can learn how to capture and leverage 3 core tools that will make you successful in this new world of life and work. And that's mindfulness, effective communication, and creating collaborative teams and relationships in your life. So, on our book club this month, we are navigating down a path of how to be unoffendable, which is the art of thriving in a world full of jerks. And this is written by I'll say a person named Einzelganger. Einzelganger is a Stoic YouTube contributor and author who talks a lot about this very subject, how to navigate this world that can often rub you the wrong way. And so we wanted to dive into this. Over the last few months, we've been focusing on how we can be better people, how we can show up in the world more mindful, more compassionate through the 4 agreements and through the art of communicating. Well, now we're taking this on the road and seeing how we can actually apply these skills and navigate the world where everybody else exists beyond just ourselves, and especially people that we may not necessarily agree with, which I don't know if you've been paying attention, but that seems to be happening, quite a lot lately. And rather than being able to show up and have effective conversations, we're just all bumping heads, jerk to jerk, yelling at one another. So that's our book for this month, How We Can Be Unoffendable, Brush It Off or Shake It Off, like Taylor Swift likes to say. So, all right, Rob, Sierra, we started with this book just kind of laying the foundation of what it means to be offended and what can happen if we get offended and what some of the origins of that offense might be. What I love right out the gate is he starts off by saying that as long as there's at least a certain degree of freedom of speech, we cannot stop being offended. Getting offended is just natural. It's just part of who we are when we encounter someone or something that we don't agree with. However, we may not have control over what he says nastiness or vitriol people throw at us, but we do have control over how we handle it. And so I'd like to first, right out the gate, just get your thoughts on what it means to be offended, and what are some experiences maybe that you've encountered where you have been offended, and maybe how you handled it great or not so great.
Well, this is a core principle of Stoicism. It's not the actual thing that happened. It's your reaction to the thing that happened is your reality, right? So it's the same way that a group of 100 people can be in a room and something can happen and you can have 100 different possible reactions to it. It's how each person responds to whatever has happened. So really, this is giving you your keys back to your own car, in that you can choose how you want to react to something. It is really easily to be offended about anything. Oh, I think he said this. I think he means this. Oh, that really hurt my feelings when this. Oh, the way that they used that particular word was not a good choice of word. And it can send you down a rabbit hole. And all of a sudden you're spiraling into this rabbit hole of what you think it means. But guess what? What you think it means is actually your choice.
Mm-hmm. 100%.
That's the hardest thing to recognize, though. So I've been a talk radio show host for on and off the last 22 years. Been called every name in the book via email, via text message, via phone call. I've had people call and say, this guy should be fired because basically I offended them because I disagreed with them on one issue. So having learned this lesson the hard way in the feedback business, you develop a thicker skin because you don't know what that person is thinking about. You don't know if that person heard you correctly. As Sierra just said, they're interpreting something that you said that struck their emotion. And as soon as I say something, or Sierra says something, or Amy says something, it leaves your mouth, it hits another person. It's going to hit them a certain way. And then their emotion's going to get stirred up, and they're going to communicate emotionally. So what Einzelganger gets at in this book is that what's the step after that emotion? So if you can say, oh, I get hit with that emotion and pause and not respond emotionally, you'll be much better off because you understand yourself a little bit more, because whatever the other person says ultimately doesn't matter because it's just words. Now, sometimes there's some good nuggets in there and you might be able to take some good feedback. I've gotten good feedback from people that have criticized me before. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting point. But when someone calls you an idiot, like you just brush that aside because you're like, okay, that's someone reacting emotionally. And I used to engage with people like that. I'm going to prove you wrong. Now I just don't care. I'm just like, okay, cool. Good for you. And I just don't even bother engaging. Now, if you want to have a debate, bring some stuff to debate without calling me a name. Because I always look at the name calling now, as he does in The Art of Thriving in the World of Jerks, is just that. We all have moments of jerkiness when our emotions get stirred up. So I try to look at it from that lens of that, oh, this is a moment of jerkiness. This person might not be a jerk. Maybe they are, but in this moment, I've had moments like that. So I'm just going to move on.
Mm-hmm. Well, to touch on that even further, one of the things that we've studied with the Stoics before is when it comes to the labels of good or bad or jerk or not jerk. And one of the things that they do talk about is the idea that a person is not a label, that, a person is not a jerk. A person is not an a-hole. They may occasionally behave that way. They may have a moment where they're behaving or responding or acting in a jerky way or in an a-hole way, but that doesn't make that person in and of themselves a jerk. It's their behavior. And those behaviors, to your point, Rob, are moments of not my best. We've all had those. But the problem that we really wanted to confront, and the reason we picked this, is because being offended seems to almost be in vogue right now. How often can I
Doesn't
proclaim?
Seem to be. It 100% is.
Yeah. How often can I be offended and proclaim my offended state to the world so that they can then capitulate to me so that I am no longer offended? And the reality is, good luck with that. We'll get into this a little bit more in a moment, but it is impossible to navigate and tiptoe around, Sierra, to your point, what someone considers offensible or not. Everyone has their own barometer of offense, of pressure, offensible pressure, if you will. It's like a barometric meter. They all have their own levels of what they get offended by. It's also based on their upbringing and their culture. But the reality is, in what we learned from the Stoics, and that they preach a lot, as well as the Buddhists, they both preach this idea that if we give the control of our happiness, of our contentment, of our ability to not be offended over to other people, to what the Stoics would call the externals, then we are basically handing over any control of ourselves over to other people. And if we don't have control over ourselves and we're handing it off to others to do for us, we're going to be pretty miserable for most of our life because we have zero control over what those other people are going to say, do, behave,
call you an idiot,
call you an idiot, call you, fill in the blanks. So I love that he
Well-
talked about that because Sierra, as a mindfulness expert, Buddhism is a big piece of that, and the tie-in between them and the Stoics is very parallel, which is nice. I always like that.
Yeah, and Eiselganger is a Dutch person, and he references at the beginning that most of his study has been focused on Stoicism and Buddhism. There are a lot of parallels. There are things that are different, but ultimately, I think the core thing that they share is they both believe that your life can be a lot of suffering if you choose it to be suffering. But also, your life can be joy if you choose to approach it from a place of joy. And I think a lot of times people choose being offended because they want so desperately to share an opinion, they want so desperately to communicate and be heard, that they maybe take offense as an opportunity to step on a soapbox, a platform to be heard. When Why do you want to make everything all about being upset, right? So what you choose to do with what you have heard is your choice. And I always say that there's really every emotion has one of two roots, fear or love. And when you react from offense, that's from a place of fear that you will not be heard, that you are not valid. When you react from a place of love, you can see that other person might be going through some things. That other person, as he points out, might be trying to make a joke or make a connection with you in their own awkward way. When you view it from a place of love, like, oh, that's so nice that person thinks enough of me that they want to try to connect, I'm going to show them that I'm here for them. It's a completely different approach, whether you decide you're going to come from a place of love or a place of fear.
Perfect example of know thyself, right? Because when you know yourself really well, no one can offend you because you're like, yeah, all right, well, okay, I'm a little disorganized. So if you joke about me being disorganized, I am. So it's not going to offend me because I already know that. And I either work on it or I just accept it and I don't really care, whatever. So I want to go back to the idiots thing for a second, because what I love about what you said, Sierra, is just that. I like how Einzelganger, I like how in chapter 1 he breaks down insults, right?
The types.
The magical world of insults, the unintended insult, the playful insult, a neg hit, the a-hole compliment, the a-hole question, one hits, body signal insults. Because when he goes through the list, you're like, oh yeah, I've done that a few times. So now not only can you understand how other people are coming at you, how you approach other people too, to bring the stoicism back into it is, what is the Marcus Aurelius quote? He's going to wake up in the morning. He's going to understand he's going to run into a world full of jerks. Essentially.
Basically, he's going to run into a world of jerks. And the most important thing is to recognize that they are who they are because of their experiences, the ways that they have been taught or have learned how to navigate, how to interact, how to communicate in this world. And if it's a way that is offensive to you, it's looking at it more from a place of love or compassion, Sierra, to your point, to say they just don't know any better.
And I would add one thing, because we always talk about, like, when it comes to my area here at Painted Porch, strategies is communication. Have a question ready. Because if someone comes at you with something, ask them a question right away. Because number one, it buys you time to really process your emotions and, oh, why'd that person sting me? But then it says, okay, why do you think that way? And then you're going to dig into what their beliefs and what has shaped them in their lives. So it gives you a little bit more insight as to where they're coming from. And once you get more insight as to where they're coming from, you're less likely to be offended. Because you have the time now to say, whoa, whoa, whoa. And you say, oh, okay, I see why you would say that. So like in my world, in the opinion world, it's becoming reality TV. I hate to break it to you, but reality TV is scripted. So they create points of drama and tension because that's what we're entertained by, right? So if you watch a movie, if you read a book, and if you watch reality TV, it's built around this tension. But we're around so much of it now, when you add in social media, it seems normal. But imagine a husband and wife or partnership that is constantly fighting. It would be exhausting to be in a relationship like that. but it seems that that is the way that the world wants to be right now. But that doesn't mean you have to be that way. That doesn't mean you have to become the next reality social media star, because it is way better. Trust me on this. Having lived in a world of tension and drama my entire life, it is way better to go in this direction, to be more in control and be calm and to be settled and to be really accepting that people are who they are in that moment that you're interacting with them. I think that's what it gets into.
Well, is the drama just being created for entertainment? Is it just
Yes.
meant to like stir things up? And if that's your job to stir things up and there's ratings based on it, then I mean, I get it. Like it's you're giving the people what they're watching, what they're asking for. But in your real life, do you need to have drama? A lot of people say, "Oh, my life is so full of stress, it's so full of drama, blah blah blah." Is it though? Or is that just the way you're choosing to perceive it? Are you choosing to perceive that it's drama? Or can you just say, that's interesting, agree to disagree? And then all of a sudden, your life is now this peaceful place where you have decided that you're just not going to feed into the drama. And that is your choice.
Yeah, and beyond, I mean, beyond the emotional, the mental components of constantly being triggered, if you will, that's the word that we hear a lot, triggered. Um, I know that that can give you that dopamine hit sometimes. Sometimes you want that hit to feel alive or whatever it might be. But you have to think about, because Sierra, you talk about this a lot in your program, Radical Mindfulness. You have to think about, what is that doing to your body every time you do that? Having your body in that constant state of stress and emotional dis-ease, that is not, your body ain't gonna be happy. That's going to be a powder keg for a lot of stuff to start going awry.
And what you do maybe to compensate, maybe you overeat or overdrink or do drugs or something along those lines, so you don't have to feel those things. But feeling those things fuels sometimes the excessive eating, the drinking, etc. And when you say program, I just want to add one thing. By program, when we say program, we have online courses for you to literally help you do what he does in this book. So there are tools that go like that next step where Einzelganger takes us. So Sierra's is fantastic. I highly recommend it. You taught me it so much. So sorry, Sierra. I just wanted to throw that in.
Well, and do you guys remember in the early 90s, and I know you do because we're around the same age, how all of a sudden there became adrenaline junkies, people that chased like rock climbing and skydiving and jumping off of cliffs and doing all this stuff, like chasing the adrenaline, right? And this was before there was social media, so it became this thing where like people were craving that excitement, like that feeling you get at a roller coaster, right? The issue is that your body cannot sustain a constant level of that. There's physiological things that happen to your kidneys, that happen to the stress hormones it's triggering in your brain. And over short bursts of time, it's okay because your body does like the peaks and valleys. But when you're constantly in a state of stress, when you're constantly in that chasing that adrenaline or engaging in arguments or getting pissed off by social media or stuff you see on TV or stuff you hear on the radio, when you're constantly at that level, when there's never a rest time, this causes major problems. And then what we saw was, then we see all these different physical ailments that are piling up on each other because we're never kind of coming down from that. You're never giving your brain a break from all of this drama. So we've come to think like, and that our attention span has become shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, to where we need to be entertained and triggered and sparked all the time. Otherwise, we feel bored. And why is feeling bored such a bad thing? That's not a bad thing. We don't need to be on this constant roller coaster of entertainment. And when he's talking about this sense of like, when are you ever going to kind of come down from that? When are you ever just going to find that peacefulness? One of the things I love, and I earmarked it, he gives us this little flow chart. This is on page 20.
It's a beautiful flow chart. I love it.
Get it on the screen. I'm all backwards here.
There
Okay,
we go.
so he says, insert the insult. So whatever the insult is. So then from there you ask yourself, is it true? So yes, is it true? Is the insult true? Like Rob, you were saying, if somebody tries to insult you about being disorganized. Okay, so yes. It's not an insult. It's the truth. Why be triggered by the truth? Or the other side, is it true? No. Okay, no, it's not true. It's nonsense. Why be triggered by nonsense? Okay?
Mhm.
So say somebody calls you an idiot, right? Is it true? Yes, I'm an idiot. Yes, I don't know what I'm talking about on the subject. Yes, that's true. I shouldn't have opened my mouth because I literally know nothing about whatever. Or no, I'm not. I'm actually very well educated. The person just disagrees with me. So I'm not going to be triggered because I'm not an idiot. I am coming from a place of knowledge.
Mhm.
I love this flow chart because you can literally put any insult there and it just helps kind of break it down. Yes, no. And guess what? The outcome is the same. Whether it was yes or no, he's saying, why be triggered by it?
Right. Exactly. And that's where it comes down to the Stoics. What they taught us and what he reiterates here is that it is not the event that hurts us. It's our interpretation and how we choose to respond to it. Choose to be harmed and you will be harmed. Choose not to and you won't be. And it's all a choice. Now, we are not saying, this book is not saying be a passive pushover. That is not what this is saying. What it is simply trying to point out is to say, don't let your emotions get the better of you. You can decide whether or not you want to be offended. You had, to quote him, we have the freedom to shrug off any disrespect, any insult, and any ridicule. You have the choice, and you have the choice. And if you're unsure how to do it, there's a really great flow chart. It's very simple. What was the insult? Was it true? Okay, then it's the truth. If you're bothered by the truth, maybe you need to sit and process that a little bit. Question, start getting curious with yourself. Why did this bother me so much when it is in fact true? Is it something that I'm ashamed about? Is it something that I need to maybe explore how to improve about myself? That's an opportunity. That's not an offense. And then if it's not true, well, then it's nonsense. I absolutely love it. That flow chart was beautiful. Either way, you're not going to get offended because you're choosing how you wish to respond and how you wish to process it.
And it comes down to the basic Stoic philosophy, the dichotomy of control.
Mhm.
You're only in control of yourself. And I love, as we get to chapter 2, it's not the outside world that offends us, he writes, but our opinions about the outside world. And then he quotes Epictetus, one of the ancient Stoics. But that's the really eye-opening part about this. You have certain beliefs, and when anything challenges that belief, that's when you get offended, when you get so-called triggered. And just understand that your opinions are not always right about everything. It's impossible to be right about everything. And it's actually okay to be wrong about certain things. And it's okay to take time and process things. Like one of the parts of my online course is we teach you how to write a rap, where you recognize, you assess, and you process. You process what's going on. It's important to take that time to go, why am I feeling this way? So a lot of people freaked out during the pandemic. I was like, nope. I took the 2 years of the pandemic to really do a ton of self-reflection because things were closed and there weren't sporting events and there weren't things that distracted me from spending time with myself. And I found I really liked spending time with myself. I like figuring myself out, my quirks, what triggers me, because I have a whole different understanding of myself than I did 2.5 years ago because I took the time. So, and to go to your point, Sarah, instead of going, oh my God, the world is closed. And I'm like, okay, the world's closed. Now what? What can I do? So I decided, I made a choice that I was going to focus on me. And that ended up helping me create Master Your Message, which will not only help you become a more effective and efficient communicator, you will also understand yourself, because what this program is, Master Your Message. I know there's a lot of self-promotion, but here's why. I have been diagnosed with depression twice, but I never spent the time to really figure out why. So when I did that, Master Your Message came out. So it is a tool to help you deal with self-doubt in addition to, because a lot of what he talks about here in this book, Unoffendable, is a result of your self-doubt, that maybe you don't have the full confidence in your opinion on this, or you don't accept that, oh, maybe I don't know enough about this. That's all okay. But when you understand the role that self-doubt plays in everyone's life, your life, my life, Amy's life, Sarah's life, different levels perhaps, but there's always a role for self-doubt because it's a survival mechanism. When you understand that, you go, okay, so when I'm not good enough, a thought like that comes up, you understand it's just a thought. It doesn't mean anything. It's just something that popped into your brain at that moment to try to keep you safe. But that isn't necessarily keeping you safe, because there is no safety in not growing as a person, as a friend, as a partner. That's where he challenges you to go beyond the being offended part and learn about yourself so you can become a better person, not just for yourself, but for everybody else around you.
Right. And I would say to put a little cap on this first section, chapters 1 and 2, what he's really doing here is he's introducing you he's introducing you to the idea of, as Rob's talking about, the pause. The pause, or being able to bring awareness to what is happening outside of your sphere of control, and specifically as it relates to insults or being offended. He talks about in chapter 1 how there's really two primary types of insults. There's the unintentional, and then there can be the playful. So it's recognizing, it's taking the time to pause to say, okay, what might this insult be that was, delivered to me, or that was thrown at me, or in my direction? What was the intention? And who's the person delivering it? What do I know about them? What do I not know about them? And be just taking that space to recognize, why is this being driven? Is it they're trying to create a connection with me, and maybe they just don't have the best way of doing it, or they do it through insults or through off-color jokes.
And he gives a few
right?
examples.
Yeah,
there.
and he gives some great examples in here of some different ways. Or it can be unintentional. He says if it is intentional, that's a little bit harder to decipher, because you can't necessarily know the root cause intent of someone else. But it's being able to just recognize the different types of insults, whether it's a body signal, a gesture, if you will, if it's a side, what do they call it? He calls it an a-hole compliment or question. It's kind of an off-color, offside comment. It's like a sly way to insult somebody with a compliment. So, doing it that way. If you're pointing out a flaw, just recognizing the different types. What type of insult is this? And then from there, why might that insult have been made? Let me pause. And then I can also decide, am I going to let this insult bother me or not? Is it going to trigger me? Or can I use this in a healthy way? Can I use this as an opportunity to maybe do a little bit of introspection within myself? Why is this bothering me? Why am I getting triggered? And it also can create an opportunity, as Rob said, to have a conversation with someone, to actually understand a little bit more why, what made you think that, or how did you come to that conclusion? Help me understand, versus you're right, or I'm right, you're wrong, you're a jerk, I'm an angel, I'm offended, you're an a-hole. Actually being able to navigate that in a more healthy way, recognizing, though, in the end, that you have the ultimate control over how you choose to receive, interpret, process, and then respond to that supposed insult.
Well, and the beautiful thing about both making the choice of whether to be offended or not, as well as, Rob, like you were mentioning about taking the time to really know yourself, is wherever you go, there you are. So if you've chosen to be offended, maybe you're offended, maybe you throw some shit back at the other person. They probably don't care, but guess who is upset? And guess who's going to carry the weight of that choice is you. So your body is going to take on that stress. You're going to feel that intense of, I'm so offended, I'm so triggered, why is everybody so mean to me? So if you're just understanding that you're only control of yourself, Your choices are going to be your destiny, are going to be your reality. So you have a lot more control than you think. It's just in how you react to what anybody says, what happens. I'm loving this book. I can't wait to see what he, gives us in the second. So as we move on next week, we're going to be starting with chapter 3. And I'm really excited. I didn't know this author prior to this book selection, so I'm really enjoying the perspective.
And I love the way he writes too. It's very accessible, to use that term. It's like you're having a conversation with him. It's not overly academic. He does throw in some Stoicism references in there, but this is not a philosophy course or a philosophy book. It's a practical guide to spotting the insults and then understanding how to better process and navigate this world that is going to continually potentially offend you, just knowing that ultimately you have the choice as to how you're going to respond or how you're going to receive, and whether or not that is going to burden you or not. We talk a lot about in Stoicism, and it's one of the central tenets of this book, but also Stoicism in general, is that the dichotomy of control. You have control over yourself, your thoughts, your reactions, your behaviors, etc. You don't have control over everything else, the externals, other people's thoughts, other people's reactions, traffic, weather. You don't have control over any of those things. And so when we talk about this idea of you have the ultimate choice, you have the ultimate control over whether or not you want to be offended, I'll flip this around to something maybe a little bit more direct. If you're constantly getting offended by what other people say, you have essentially ceded your ability and your happiness and your power to other people. You are letting other people control you. And so if you do not want to be, to quote, I think it's Seneca, a puppet where someone else is pulling the strings, you learn the tools, the methods, and the practices so that way you are not being pulled around. You are actually the one in control. So thank you, Rob. Thank you, Sierra. This is week 1 of our 3-week exploration into Unoffendable, the art of living in a world full of jerks by Einzelganger. Next week, we're going to start with chapters 3 through 7, and we're going to continue to dig into ways that we can navigate and thrive in this world where people are constantly either trying to or unintentionally pushing our buttons.